Erev Shabbat Shalom, Riverdale Minyan, getting ready for Parashat Toldot, and my favorite day of the week, Shabbos. Thank God. A couple people this week came to me. This was out of the blue and totally unconnected. One was very upset about the way someone had spoken to her. Another person was pointing out things that they had seen on social media about people who had a pre-existing relationship who were just nasty to each other. It got me thinking about how we communicate with others, and sometimes the people who we're closest to are the ones who we tend to fall into bad habits of communication with. So I wanted to share this idea. The Parsha begins with the birth of two of the most famous twins, certainly in Tanakh and possibly in history, Yaakov and Esav. And the Torah tells us Esav came exhausted and sees Yaakov, who normally is out there, is in the Beit Midrash learning, cooking up a stew. And Esav says to him, "Haleiteni na min ha'adom azeh ki ayef anochi." Give me haleiteni. We'll talk about haleiteni in a second. Give me some of that red stuff because I am done. I am exhausted. Ayef anochi. The Mefarshim, the commentators, want to find out what was he so tired from. Rashi says he was tired because he was a murderer, and murderers are tired. He was out doing murder. Some of the other Mefarshim are a little kinder. The Chizkuni and Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor explain that when you're a hunter, you have to go out and you're stalking your prey in the field, and that might take a couple days. I think about these hunters who go out like in the middle of the night and they wait for the deer to cross into the sights of their rifles. So he was out. Esav had been out stalking his prey, and he's exhausted, and he was hungry, and he was thirsty, and he wanted to just get something. He was parched. The Beis Halevi, you can't say Beit Halevi. The Beis Halevi, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the Brisker Rav, has a very unique take on this. And to understand him, you have to know the famous midrash that Rashi cites, which explains that Yaakov wasn't just cooking some stew because it was Thursday and it was left overnight. Yaakov was cooking a stew of adashim, of lentils, because this was the Sudat Havra'ah. This was the morning meal after the burial of his grandfather Avraham. And they eat lentils the way we have the minhag to eat eggs or to eat chickpeas, things that are round. And that's what he was busy preparing and not learning in the Beis Midrash. Esav understood this, says the Beis Halevi, but he was such a glutton and such a so thinking about himself, such an egoist, that he pretended not to notice what the stew was, that it was made of lentils. And he says this word haleiteni. Haleiteni occurs one time in Tanakh, the fancy word for a word that only occurs one time. I had to write this down. A hapax legamenon, a word that only occurs one time in the entire work. Haleiteni, says Ibn Ezra, means ha'echilani. Just pour it right down my throat. The Beis Halevi says that Esav wanted Yaakov to pour it down his throat so he wouldn't even have to acknowledge that there were lentils in it. It was just red stuff. Because if he had to acknowledge there were lentils, then he would admit that it was a Sudat Havra'ah. He'd have to acknowledge that Avraham had died. He'd have to think about someone beyond his own needs. That's what a tired, exhausted person does. That's Esav. I think that we're all tired right now. I know that we're all tired right now. We talk about pandemic fatigue. We talk about election fatigue. We talk about all kinds of exhaustion that we're feeling. And that sometimes can allow us to speak in the ways that we know we shouldn't speak. And often it's the people who we're closest to that we are able to push the buttons of, because our best behavior is off when we're talking to people who we're closest to. The challenge for all of us, because this exhaustion, the fatigue is not going anywhere, is for us to really push ourselves to be our best selves when we're communicating with those who are closest to us. That could be a communication that we have live, that could be a phone call, that could be a Zoom call, that could be on social media. On social media, it's easy to hide behind the words that you type, and I saw some really nasty things on social media this week that I will not share with you. But our challenge in these challenging times is to push ourselves that much further, to be those best people that we can be, and not to be tired. Rest up. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.